Hi, this is Charlie Thompson, and welcome to the lecture slides for the chapter on religion. So what are we going to look at in this chapter? We're going to look at where are religions located? Why do they have different distributions? Just like language, some religions are found in one small part of the world, and other religions are found all over the world and have millions of followers. What are some of the effects on the landscape? Why does conflict arise among religious groups? I'll talk a lot about this later, but for now, let me just say I don't think I can find a lot of good examples of conflict between religious groups where religion is the driver of the conflict. I think most, if not all, of the examples of conflict among religious groups, there's a political conflict, and religion is just one more layer in that conflict. It's much easier to kill people if you think God is on your side. So, yeah, we'll look at different examples of conflict, but really I think they're all just political conflicts that also have religion as an added element. So, definition time. What is religion? Religion is a system of beliefs regarding conduct in accordance with either divine commands found in sacred writings or declared by authoritative teachers. I'm really happy with this definition. I think it's broad enough that it will encompass all the religions that we would want to talk about, but without being overly broad. So it includes, declared by authoritative teachers. That could be you. You could be the authoritative teacher if you're following your own inspirational religion. Some other elements of religion. Most involve a god or gods, but not all of them. Some of them are ethical or psychological belief systems. For example, Buddhism they don't have gods. It's more a ethical or psychological belief system, but we still classify it as a religion. Because going back to what is a religion, it's a system of beliefs regarding conduct in accordance with either, and it's not divine commands, but it's declared by authoritative teachers. In this case, Buddha, or the person that we refer to as one of the Buddhas, although most of the time in the West he's just called the Buddha because most people in the West don't realize that Buddha is a title, not a name. There have been countless Buddhas. So some don't address the nature of gods or an afterlife. That's not a requirement to be a religion. And for those of you that like dividing things up before you study it, let's divide up religions into two categories. There are universalizing religions that have universal appeal. Anybody can join. You don't need to be born into it. You don't need to be born into a certain village or born into a certain family or speak a certain language. If anybody can join, if it's open to all, it is a universalizing religion, appealing to all people. And ethnic religions typically are local religions with a local appeal, might just be practiced in one tiny village and no place else on the planet. Appeals mainly to a group of people in one place. However, Hinduism is classified as an ethnic religion, and that has over 1 billion followers. So they don't have to be small. And in this case, I was going to say Hinduism is like the Chinese language of religions in that Chinese spoken Mandarin spoken by almost 1 billion people, but almost all of them are in China. Hinduism, 1 billion people that are Hindus, but they're almost all in India. Most of the world belongs to a universalizing religion. 24% belong to an ethnic or local religion, and 15% they don't belong to any religion. One of the ways of looking at religions is the number of gods that they have. They could be atheist and say there are no gods. That would be a religious belief. Monotheist, there's just the one true God. Polytheist, there's many, many, many gods. Why do we study? As a geographer, what are we looking at? Well, all religions have a hearth. They started someplace. They have a pattern of diffusion. Some, like Christianity, have gone worldwide. Others, like Islam, not Islam, Islam is worldwide. Hinduism is largely constrained to India. So they have a hearth, they have a pattern of diffusion, and they have a current distribution. Christianity worldwide, Hinduism in India, and some religions have gone extinct. So not spreading out is still a pattern of diffusion, and not existing is part of the current distribution. Some of the biggest religions, Christianity, 2.2 billion people on the planet, so less than a third. There is no dominant religion at this time on Earth. The majority or plurality, the religion with the most adherents is Christianity with 2.2 billion, divided up into Catholicism with about 1 billion adherents, Protestants about 800 million, and Eastern Orthodox, found mainly in Russia, with 260 million. Muslims, 1.6 billion. Muslim or Islam is the fastest growing religion. We'll talk about that later. Hindus, about 1 billion Hindus. However, as I keep saying, they're almost all in India. Buddhists, about 500 million. It's tough to keep track of Buddhists because they would be the religion that would have no problem being Buddhist and Hindu, or Buddhist and some sort of Christian denomination. And then folk religions, ethnic religions, local religions, things like shamanism, Qawwali, would be classified as folk religions. About 400 million people all over the world are still following some sort of folk religion. So universalizing religions, we've got Christianity, we've got Islam, we've got Buddhism, we've got the Sikh faith. And here is a pie chart showing the breakdown into Christians and Sunni and Shiite Muslims, Hindus, East Asian, other ethnic religions, and then non-religious. Different pie chart. I think I like this one better. Although it doesn't have anything broken down. So in this pie chart, they've got Sunni and Shia Muslims separated out. They've got Catholic, Protestant, Eastern Orthodox, and other Christians broken out, as opposed to just saying, well, 31% of the planet's Christian, 23% Muslim, 15% Hindu, 7% Buddhist, about 6% some sort of folk religion, Judaism, 0.2%, and unaffiliated, about 16%. So the unaffiliated, that's interesting. So here they're saying they're classified as non-religious. Here they're unaffiliated, which means no particular religion. But here they're saying no religion in particular. I suspect that it really is no religion, no religious preference whatsoever. The spatial distribution matches very closely colonial patterns. So there's an exercise, a GIS exercise, looking at language and religion, although I would say it goes back larger, that the same colonizing group had a language and a religion. So things like the places where they speak English are typically Protestant. South Africa, Namibia, which was a German colony, Nigeria, which was a British colony, Australia, New Zealand, British colonies, the United States, British colonies. So the places where people are Protestant Christians, largely colonized by the British. Places where they're Catholic, they were either speaking Spanish throughout Central and most of South America, or Portuguese in Brazil, French and Belgians in the Congo in Africa. So Catholicism in parts of Africa. And Eastern Orthodox from Greece up into Ukraine and across Russia. The dominant faith across Eastern Europe is Eastern Orthodox Christianity. The purple, Islam throughout North Africa and Southwest Asia, extending across India into Bangladesh and Indonesia, the largest Muslim country on the planet. We have Japanese religions, Shintoism mixed with Buddhism, Chinese religions, Buddhism. We have Buddhism, Hinduism. And what else? Oh, and indigenous local religions. So shamanism, animism, other local religions are the yellow bits. And I would point out that was the original shamanism is believed to be the original religion globally. So every place people would have been shamans back, someplace between 2,000 and 4,000 years ago. And then things started changing with things like Judaism and Christianity coming in later. So I think that's good for patterns. Another map, in this exercise, in this chapter rather, I've included multiple maps just for fun. Gosh, I hope you find it interesting, although it's a geography course, so hopefully you're looking forward to lots of different maps showing the same thing, slightly different ways. These two maps are trying to show the same thing. And it's interesting. I think I prefer this map because the boundaries don't line up with countries. So like there's a blob of local religion and a blob of local religion and a blob of local religion. And this approach, I think they just took the whole country and whatever was the most popular in that country, they just made it that color. So we've got Protestant Christianity, we've got Catholicism and Protestant Christianity and Islam, but all that detail is lost because it's being mapped now at the country level. So all those little pockets of indigenous religions have vanished. Christianity, I'm just going to go with the belief that God lived on earth as Jesus. It's the largest religion in the world. It has three main branches: Catholicism, Protestantism, and Eastern Orthodox. And they all have a spatial pattern, which is really nice. They go, the branches, the distribution of the branches goes along with language for the most part. Diffusion patterns. So Christianity has diffused through all three of the main diffusion mechanisms. So there's relocation diffusion by missionaries just moving someplace else. Contagious diffusion within the Roman Empire, spreading by word of mouth in the days when it was prohibited. Also, then, once the missionaries show up in a town, it's going to spread potentially through contagious diffusion. And also via possibly hierarchical diffusion. That's something that often happens in countries that were colonized by the British. The British came in speaking English, worshiping in Christian churches, and so the movers and the shakers adopted English and Christianity to try to get ahead in that culture. Other examples, the Roman Emperor Constantine in 313, also the Emperor Theodosius in 380, said, hey, everybody's Christian. Also King Harald Fairhair in Norway around 1000. In fact, it was King Harald Fairhair's rule and adoption of Christianity as the official religion that led to Vikings settling in Iceland. So we've got hearths, and I don't have, I have these maps that show everything at the same time, although these weren't happening at the same time. And it just occurred to me that makes this not a great map. Although you can see the diffusion patterns of, for example, Christianity with the hearth spreading out in the Mideast and then Asia into Africa. Islam starting Mecca and Medina in the Saudi Arabian Peninsula and then spreading throughout North Africa, spreading into East Africa, spreading across Asia, spreading across all of India, and then down into Indonesia where it is today. Hinduism coming from the Punjab down into India, being brought in with the Aryan people. And then Buddhism starting in Nepal, spreading into India, into Asia, north into China, down into Southeast Asia, and then finally making its way to Korea and Japan. Oh yeah, so it's the same map. It's just this time they've added, that very helpful. Very, very helpful. I was going to say they included elevation of mountains. So there's this texturing, and it just occurred to me that the Tibetan Plateau is significant enough that I applaud this decision, that the Tibetan Plateau has an average elevation of about 15,000 feet. That's 3 times higher than Denver. So it is a very high, very cold plateau with lots of mountains, and it would have been a barrier to migration. So it explains why people went west and east out of Nepal, and they're shown going straight up, but I think they actually kind of snuck in the back door. Now we've got some dates showing Christianity and Islam and Buddhism by the 8th century, 12th century, after the 12th century. More of the same, showing dates. Now we have we've lost Hinduism, so we're just showing Buddhism and Islam and Christianity. And I really like this diagram. This was a diagram from a totally different chapter in a textbook that I used years ago, but it had a really good map showing the extent of the Roman Empire in AD 117. The red line is showing the boundary of the Roman Empire all the way up to Hadrian's Wall, all of France, all of Spain, most of coastal North Africa down into Egypt. And also the green lines are the roads that lead to Rome. You may have heard the expression, all roads lead to Rome. Well, they really did, because it was the Romans that built them, and they built them for transport. Spatial patterns of Christianity. Northwest Europe and its colonies are largely Protestant, including parts of the US. Southwest and Eastern Europe is largely Catholic, so France, Spain, Italy, largely Catholic. And then Eastern and Southeastern Europe, largely Greek Orthodox, so Greece, Ukraine, Russia. I was going to say, these are words. Words are helpful. Just show me the map. So all the pink parts are Catholic. All the green parts are some sort of Protestant religion, some sort of Protestant group. And then the orange parts are Eastern Orthodox. So we've got Church of England, we've got Lutherans, and Lutherans, Norway, Sweden, Denmark. Those are going to be important in just a bit when we look at the distribution of Christianity across the US. Different map showing the same thing. Other religions, in this case, it's largely Islam. Largely Islam. We've got Protestant, although now they don't break out the Church of England, and Lutheranism, Eastern Orthodox, and Catholic. Spatial patterns in the U.S. The U.S. is mainly Protestant. Southern Baptists in the South, that should be easy to remember. Catholics in the Southwest are the places that were settled by the Spanish, are Catholic. And then Latin and South America is also Roman Catholic. So this is an older map showing the distribution of different Christian denominations. That's the word I was looking for, denominations. So Christianity is the religion. In this case, Protestants, Catholics, Lutherans, those are different denominations of the same religion. The religion's Christianity, the denominations would be Protestant, Southern Baptist, United Methodist, Catholic. And I think there's some really interesting spatial patterns. There's the Mormon cultural hearth, although they started out in New York, made their way across, settled in Salt Lake City. So all the purple places are predominantly Mormon or Latter-day Saint. The Southern Baptists down here, Lutherans, I love this part because it's just so funny to me, because I'm not, well, part of my family is from Norway, but so these are Lutherans, and they're mainly Scandinavian, and they settled here because the climate was similar to home, which is to say it's freezing for 6 months of the year. But if the climate is similar to home, you don't have to learn new ways of growing new crops. You can just do what you did at home. So we've got Lutherans up here. And then I love the distribution of Methodists. If this was some sort of biological, if we were looking at species of animals or plants, my assessment would be that Southern Baptists need a warm and humid climate, that the Methodists of all of the groups have the narrowest temperature range, because it's warmer down here and colder up here. They started on the East Coast, worked their way west until they ran into the Rockies, and then they just stopped because I guess the mountains were a barrier to them. That's not really what happened, but if I was a biologist looking at this map, that's the story that I would make up. So we've got Methodists, we've got Southern Baptists, we've got Lutherans. All the green stuff is Protestant. We've got Mormons. I'm sorry, the green stuff is Catholic. My bad. The green stuff is Catholic. Different map, different colors. Yellow's Catholic, green is Southern Baptist. Now they're including Black Protestant churches, and in fact, that's totally fascinating. You can even see the curve in the Black Belt soils from day one. Another example, everything is related in geography. So we've got Catholics, we've got Protestants. Now they've just lumped the Methodists in with different Protestants, the Mormon regions. And I thought this was interesting. I'm not sure it belongs here because I'm still talking about Christianity, but it's interesting the distribution of places where there are non-Christian religions in a significant amount. Looks like mainly Judaism in the Northeast, Judaism in Florida. Couple regions with significant Muslim populations. Baha'u'llah, another newish faith. And yeah, I already mentioned the green is Islam. Not really noticing any patterns yet. Oh, let's talk about Islam. The second largest religion in the world. It is the fastest growing, largely because of demographic factors. It's not that they're out there proselytizing like the Mormons and like the Jehovah's Witnesses going door to door, but just the countries that are Muslim are the countries that have higher birth rates. So, for example, Eastern Orthodox, if you were going to pick a Christian faith that would be decreasing in population rapidly, I'd say, Eastern Orthodox, because the countries where they're Eastern Orthodox, like Russia, Ukraine, they have declining populations. So their numbers are shrinking, but the countries that are Muslim are still growing. Islam means submission to the will of Allah. One who submits is a Muslim. The main faith, the main tenets, the main ideas of a religion, it's called their tenets, ideas, tenets, same word. 5 pillars of Islam. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. If you're Muslim, you should pray 5 times a day facing towards Mecca. There's a Swedish compass company that makes a compass. In fact, now there's got to be an app for your phone to find the direction to pray towards Mecca. But there was a Swedish compass company that used to make a compass for Muslims all over the world. And in fact, I've heard discussion of this that because we've had Muslims now on the International Space Station, and so they have to pray facing Mecca, which is of course facing Earth, but it's led to discussion among Muslim scholars of, after humanity spreads out, if we get off of Earth, which way are they supposed to pray? You're supposed to give generously to charity. This is called almsgiving to the poor, either directly or by donating to an organization. You're supposed to fast during the holy month of Ramadan, and the Muslim calendar, totally fascinating, uses a 12-month lunar calendar, which means that their month is they're missing a month. That's where I'm going with this, because the lunar calendar is about 28 days, and so 28 times 12 leaves you a month short. So every year, the month of Ramadan falls a month earlier on our calendar. And I don't understand why they didn't use a 13 lunar month calendar. 13 lunar months of 28 days gets you 364 days. So you'd be off a day. Every so often you'd have to throw in, every couple of years you'd need to throw in a leap day, an extra special bonus day to make up for that. But it's not like you're a month off. So if Ramadan was in the winter, 6 months from now, it'll be in the summer. If Ramadan, you get it. And if you can afford it, once in your life, you're supposed to make a pilgrimage called the Hajj to Mecca. The history and diffusion of Islam. Muhammad was born in 570 in Mecca. At the age of 40, he got the revelation from the angel Gabriel, and he wrote the Quran. Muhammad died in 632 Common Era. The distribution of Muslims, there's the Shia or Shiites, about 15% of the Muslim world made up of Shiites, mainly in Iran and Iraq. Sunni, 85% of the world is a Sunni Muslim. So if you're not in Iran or Iraq, you're probably a Sunni Muslim. And then there's also the Sufis, who have never been large in numbers, but they're very interesting. So the Shiites, at the time of the death of the Prophet Muhammad, he hadn't left a successor. He did not appoint, this is my number 2, and he'll take over after I'm gone. So after Muhammad died, there was a power vacuum, and the Shia said, oh, obviously the cousin of Muhammad, Prince Ali, should be the head. And I believe he was the first of 12 imams. The last imam, the 12th Imam Mehdi, they believe physically went into hiding, that he is in fact in heaven, I believe with Muhammad, but that he will come back later. He will be making his return. And this is a good time to mention that the United States, when it invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, at least the military planners were completely unaware of the fact that Iraq, although it was largely a secular Muslim country, it did not have the same level of religious impact on laws and the culture. Iraq was largely a secular Islamic country, but there was still religious tension between the Shiites and the Sunnis. So the ruling party was made up of Sunnis, but there's a substantial proportion of the country of Iraq that is Shiite. And the U.S. was, I think, totally unprepared for the conflict between the Shiites and the Sunnis after the U.S. killed Saddam Hussein. That violence has led to 1 million extra deaths as a result of the U.S. invasion of, after the illegal U.S. invasion, after the second illegal invasion of Iraq by the United States. It has been estimated that the excess deaths, the number of deaths that are above what would be considered normal, is about 1 million people. And that's largely been sectarian violence of Shiites and Sunnis. In fact, there's a group out of UCLA that was tracking ethnic cleansing of neighborhoods because the satellites would fly over at night and snap a picture, and they could see where the lights are on, where the lights are off. And over time, they would watch a neighborhood go from being brightly lit to dark. And at that point, all of the, I'll just say in this case, Sunnis, let's say it was a Sunni neighborhood, it's brightly lit. And then it goes dark, and that's when the Sunnis all left because they were afraid of violence from the Shiites. And then the lights come on again, but it's not the Sunnis. It is now Shiites that have taken over that block. And the Shiite and Sunni violence in Iraq, like I said, has claimed over 1 million lives. Also, one of the most profound things that happened and went virtually unnoticed in the U.S. was the demolition, the explosion, the bombing of the Mosque of the Golden Dome, which is the actual mosque that Imam Mehdi left from and is supposed to come back to. So, recognizing that you might be more familiar with Christian analogies, it would be as if the Pope stepped into a closet in the Vatican and disappeared, and the Catholics all believe that the Pope is now in heaven with Jesus, but the Pope will be coming back to the Vatican later, and then the U.S. invades Italy, and in the ensuing violence, a group of extremists blows up the Vatican so that the Pope can't come back there. So there's the Shiites, and then the Sunnis, and the Sunnis believe that the father-in-law, Muhammad's father-in-law, Abu Bakr, should have been the next head of Islam. So the Sunnis trace back to Muhammad, but Abu Bakr, the father-in-law of Muhammad. And then there's the Sufis, and they're a mystical branch. Some of the aspects of the Sufi faith include Qawwali singing. Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan is probably a Pakistani singer who's now dead, but probably the most famous, most important Qawwali singer worldwide. These long half an hour, 20-minute long songs. The whirling dervishes, the spinning people, are performing acts of worship and devotion when they stand and spin. And then the poet Jalal ad-Din Muhammad Rumi, better known in the West just as Rumi, was also a Sufi. So let's take a look at what we've got. This is a 27-minute long clip. I've included it so that you'll be familiar with the works of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. We're not going to watch it now. Picture of whirling dervishes perfectly at the Rumi Fest in 2007. I've included a Rick Steves video talking about a visit to Turkey to witness a performance of these dervishes. Rick Steves gives some context to what they're doing when they're spinning. It's not just the spinning that's important. They're doing stuff, and he'll explain that. Yeah, we don't have time for that now. And then I thought I'd just throw in some poetry, because that's what all good geography classes need. On the seeker's path, wise men and fools are one. In his love, brothers and strangers are one. Go on, drink the wine of the beloved. In that faith, Muslims and pagans are one. Yeah, it'd probably be good to share the Sufi Muslim poetry of Rumi with the frightened Americans that have been on the receiving end of 20 years of propaganda that all the Muslims are bloodthirsty killers. Go on, drink the wine of the beloved. In that faith, Muslims and pagans are one. Yeah. Another poem. The minute I heard my first love story, I started looking for you, not knowing how blind that was. Lovers don't finally meet somewhere. They're in each other all along. And then some religious poetry from Rumi. Knock and he'll open the door. Vanish and he'll make you shine like the sun. Fall and he'll raise you to the heavens. Become nothing and he'll turn you into everything. Thank you, Rumi. Hey, it's time for another map showing the timing of the spread of Islam. So coming out of Saudi Arabia after the death of Muhammad in 632, occupying present-day Turkey and India and Indonesia and Africa up into Spain. And then some of those regions are no longer Muslim. This is now Catholic. This is now Hindu. But Indonesia still is the world's largest Muslim nation. Muslim by 632. Most of Saudi Arabia was already Muslim by the time of the death of the Prophet, and then spreading out across North Africa and into Southwest Asia. Ooh, and it's a cartogram, in which case each box represents 1 million Muslims. So you can see Indonesia, they have the most boxes, they win. And I don't know why you'd use just a slightly darker border color. That's just awful. To show the border between India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, but maybe it's just a good example of borders are stupid. Nigeria, large Muslim population in Nigeria, especially in the north. Northern Nigeria is where there's southern Nigeria predominantly Christian, northern Nigeria predominantly Muslim. This is where, example, Boko Haram, the terrorist group, operates. US, Argentina, UK, Spain, France, tiny, tiny, tiny. Most of them in the Mideast. Oh, I like this. We're going to be looking at these people in a minute. This is China. So these are Muslims in China, the Uyghur people, and just showing the distribution of Shiites and Sunnis and others. Different map showing the same thing. Percent Muslim population, 1% or fewer, 50 to 100%. And the Muslim cultural hearth. Different map showing the same thing. I said I was going to do this, and I meant it. So we've got different Shiites along with Sunnis. So we've got Afghanistan and Pakistan. Shiite, little bits of Shiite. Another map showing the same thing, in this case going country by country, percent Muslim. So yeah, North Africa and Southwest Asia and Indonesia and Bangladesh is where the majority of them are. And I wanted to talk about the Uyghur genocide going on in China. So the Uyghurs are a Muslim group in China. And what's happening to the Uyghurs is very similar to what happened to the country of Tibet after the Chinese invaded Tibet. The difference is that the Uyghurs have been living in China all along, and the difference was that China invaded Tibet in 1949. But aside from that, very similar, the actions of the Chinese government and the response of the global community. So in the Uyghur areas, they're crushing the religion. They're actually destroying mosques, just like in Tibet. They destroyed the Buddhist monasteries. They're trying to keep people from learning Uyghur language. They're being taught Mandarin Chinese in the schools. Their entire culture, their dress, they're not allowed to dress in their traditional clothing. They're supposed to wear more Chinese. It's just part of China. China, I don't know if, I hate to throw in a Star Trek metaphor when all of you have been doing a great job dealing with Steve Graves' Jedi mind trick theme in the textbook. But in Star Trek, China's like the Borg. They will just assimilate you. They are so large. There's so many of them. It's like we're talking about a million Muslims, a million Uyghurs that are currently being persecuted. But that's a million out of what, 1.4 billion? So that's like one out of, well, not even one. Yeah, it's less than 1%. It's barely noticeable in the overall makeup of China, but it's still a million people. A million are being held in concentration camps. And in those camps, they're forced to do labor for making products that will then be sold in the United States. Human rights abuses in these camps, forced sterilization of Uyghur women to reduce their population on one hand. On the other hand, there are allegations of mass rape by the Chinese, with Chinese guards raping Uyghur women, trying to dilute their Uyghurness. There are claims of medical experimentation on the Uyghurs in these concentration camps. There are allegations and documentation of organ harvesting of Uyghur political prisoners. So if you want a kidney, you can have one. They're going to get it from a Uyghur who may not like the idea of giving up his kidney, but it doesn't matter because it's China. Forced labor camps for the cotton industry. There's a video, and also, I want to say The Atlantic. Somebody just had an article on it. Yeah. So I've thrown 3 or 4 videos into the playlist. I'll probably ask you questions on the take-home midterm that will be coming up in several weeks about the Uyghurs in China. Hinduism actually means religions of India, which always makes me chuckle because I have a tiny brain. It's like Chinese food, right? If you go to China and you go to Pizza Hut and have pizza, you know, it's Chinese food because you're eating it in China. So the idea that Hinduism just means religions of India, well, whatever you got there is Hinduism. But let's take a look at what Hinduism actually is. It's one of the world's oldest religions. The texts are about 4,000 years old. They date to about 1800 before Common Era. The religion came in with the Aryan people. The Indo-European language and the Hindu religion came out of the Punjab, brought into India with Aryans. And Hindus individually can choose to be, and I talked about this at the very beginning, that different religions are atheist or monotheistic or polytheistic. But as a Hindu within the religion, you could be a polytheist. I believe in thousands of deities. Monotheistic, it's just all Brahman. Agnostic, I don't know. Atheistic, there ain't nothing there. So Hinduism is, on one hand, a really large religion. And on the other hand, it's very much an individual religion. It could be practiced by an individual doing acts of devotion at home, as opposed to going to a huge church. So there's a wide range of practices as a Hindu. Hinduism itself is a synthesis of many beliefs, some local beliefs that predate the Aryan people, the beliefs of the incoming pastoralist Indo-Aryans. Pastoralist means that there are herders of animals. elements of pre-Hindu religions. So mother goddess worship, Yaksha was the name of one of these mother goddesses that existed in India. So in fact, goddess worship existed all over the world, especially throughout the Mediterranean. The mother goddess worship was replaced most places with a male deity. At least in the Mediterranean that happened. In the case of Hinduism, the mother goddess was replaced with thousands of deities. Yaksha representing nature spirits. Yaksha was connected to water, fertility, trees, the forest, and wilderness, which is really interesting considering the timing of this would have been pre-Aryan invasion, predating the mass migration of groups of people into India. And here's a statue of one of these yakshas, one of these mother goddesses holding a tree. And this is showing languages across India, language families. These yellow are the Dravidian languages that predate the Indo-Iranian languages. So the Indo-Iranian languages came in out of the Punjab. The language and the religion came in at the same time with the people. And the language didn't replace, the Indo-Iranian languages did not replace the existing Dravidian languages down here in southern India. So Hinduism, on one hand, one of the beliefs is that everything is Brahman, this one God consciousness. All the different deities, everything we see, it's all just Brahman. So in that sense, it's monotheistic. But Brahman has different emanations showing different sides of himself. Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer, representing three facets of existence: creation, preservation, and destruction. There are also thousands of other deities: Ganesh, Krishna, Hanuman, and on and on and on. And as a Hindu, you might choose to affiliate yourself with the deity that you feel the most connection with. So, for example, Ganesh is seen as the remover of obstacles. So very popular with students. Yeah, that's good. So Brahma shown here with four heads, very common in Hindu and Buddhist iconography, the idea that they would have multiple heads. Vishnu chilling, being protected by an umbrella made out of cobras. There's another shot of Vishnu with, I don't know who that is, on another lotus, and he's holding a lotus. That's a club. The conch, and again, the cobras. Shiva, the destroyer, shown here with long hair and a trident, and the three marks on his forehead. Another view of Shiva, the destroyer, again with the trident and the three lines on the forehead. Shiva Natraj, it is through Shiva's dancing. This is dancing Shiva, dancing on the dwarf of ignorance, and it is through Shiva's dancing that the world continues to exist. I believe when Shiva stops dancing, everything will be destroyed, which is cool because everything's got to start again. That Hinduism is very much a cyclical religion, and I think most people grew up in Christianity, which is a very much linear religion. In that there was, if you're a Christian, one of the things you believe is there was a beginning, we're here now, and there will be an end. Time is linear. But in Hinduism, everything just goes around and around and around. As an individual, you're born, you live, you die. You're reborn, you live, you die, you're reborn. That at the individual level, that happens at the cosmic level, that entire cosmoses would be born and exist and extinguished and born and exist and extinguish, that everything is in this constant cycle of creation and recreation. Ganesh, the remover of obstacles. And then I have no idea what was going on with this. I was just doing a web search for images of Ganesh, and this popped up. I don't know why this scooter company decided to use Ganesh, the remover of obstacles, as their mascot. There's a picture of baby Krishna. Baby Krishna was a god. Baby Krishna was blue. This is a butter churn, and Krishna's got his hand in a tub of butter, which I thought was funny until I had kids. And one day my daughter, like lightning, lunged across the table, grabbed a chunk of butter and shoved it in her mouth. She was probably 2 or 3. So baby Krishna, here's Krishna begging for butter. That's nicer. And then this modern art of Mac Daddy Krishna, baby Krishna, and some Wisconsin grade AA butter. So one of the stories that I like about Krishna is when he was a baby, his parents left him with humans because some of the other gods were out to get him for whatever reason. And baby Krishna used to like to eat butter. Baby Krishna used to like to eat dirt. And one day, baby Krishna picked up a little ball of dirt, popped it in his mouth, and his human mother said, "Give me that." Opened his mouth, and he looked inside. And because he was a god, he decided to mess with her. And the ball of dirt, bam, in his mouth. Instead of seeing his mouth with the dirt, his mother saw all of the humans who were alive at that moment on Earth. And bam, it was all of the humans alive, all of the humans that had been alive, all of the humans that would be alive. And bam, she was seeing the sheer totality of physical existence, everything, the totality, and bam, it was back to a ball of dirt. And she took it out of his mouth and said, "Quit that." Oh, Krishna, you're funny. There's Mac Daddy Krishna. Another view of Mac Daddy Krishna with his consort Radha. Hanuman. I was looking for pictures of Kali Durga that in Hindu art and Buddhist art, often the same deity will be represented in a merciful manifestation. This could be the merciful manifestation of Kali Durga, and a wrathful or angry manifestation of that deity. I have no idea who this person actually was, but she popped up, so I kept it. That's the Kali Durga I was looking for, the wrathful, angry Kali Durga, who's carrying... Let's break down some of these elements. She's got a trident for spearing things. She's got a knife that's used to cut off bodies. This is a chakra. I don't know if it's like a metal razor-edged frisbee. Here we've got a club for beating people, a sword. She's got a necklace of human skulls. She's wearing an apron made of flayed human skin and heads. She's holding a severed head. She's got this little cup. That's human blood. That is a flaming thing, an arrow, and the conch. I don't know what she's doing with that. So this would be the merciful manifestation of Ma Kali. We've got Hanuman and a little Krishna with 4 arms now and a severed human head. Like, where'd you get that? Doesn't that person want it back? Krishna. Hinduism. If you were a Hindu, you would choose your own path of devotion with the deity that you felt kinship with. And if you were into Shiva, you were a Shivite. I would be, if I was a Shivite, and I'm not, but if I was a Shivite, I'd be on track that one of the ways of being a good Shivite is to live the American dream, be a father, be a successful business person, raise your children. And then when your children are married and out of the house and onto their lives, and you retire, you could just become a wandering beggar, a wandering naked beggar. There's an example of a Shivite. They often have dreadlocks because they're beggars. They don't have any way of dealing with their hair. Although in opposition to Buddhist monks that often shave their head, here is a young Shivite. He's got the trident, so you know he's a Shivite. And he's probably covered, this gray stuff is probably ash from cremated bodies. It's very common for Shivites to cover themselves with the ash from cremated bodies as a reminder of just how temporary our physical existence is. And here he's got a begging bowl, although it looks like it also has ash in it. Shivites smoking a chillum loaded with cannabis. And and I don't remember why I think this, but I think this picture was actually taken inside a graveyard. Shivites will often meditate and hang out in graveyards, again, as a reminder, as a way of making sure that they remember just how temporary our physical existence is. This guy is smoking a chillum, and I think he's held his arm in the air for something like 30 years. So yoga is not just a method of stretching, but can be, not always, but can be a religious practice, that through these physical practices, you are working on your spiritual betterment. And so he has held his right arm in the air as a spiritual practice. He's performing physical acts that he believes have spiritual meaning. And at this point, I think he can't put his arm down. I think the ligaments are such that his arm is now going to be in the air forever. But it's an example of how, like, as a Hindu, it's very much an individual religion, that you follow your path. And we've got another naked Shivite, and this is at the Kumbh Mela, the Maha Kumbh Mela. Maha means big. You'll see that word later. Maha Kumbh Mela. It's the largest human gathering on earth. One of them, 70 million humans in the same place on the same day. And it's at this river, the Yamuna River and the Ganges River. And I believe there's a third mystical river as well. And on astrologically auspicious days every year, there's this mass gathering and bathing. And it starts with the parade of the Shivites. You know, if you wanted to see thousands and thousands and thousands of old naked dudes, I would recommend the Kumbh Mela. If you also want to see one of the largest human gathering in the world ever, you could go to the Kumbh Mela. Millions and millions and millions and millions of people. This is satellite view. Those reddish, all that, those are people. Kind of hard to see. It's not a very good satellite shot. Hinduism, the goal, well, there really isn't one, but the point of Hinduism is to reach nirvana. That they say that we have a cyclical existence. We're born, we live, we die. We're born, we live, we die. We just keep doing that again and again and again until we figure it out. Once we figure it out, we reach nirvana, we are enlightened, and we can escape this cyclical existence, this world of suffering. One of the other Hindu ideas is karma, which is the belief that the present is based on the past. They say if you want to know how you were in your last life, look where you were born this life. And if you want to know what you'll be born into in your next life, just look at how you're living this life. So karma is simple causality. If I put my hand on the stove, I get burned because the stove was hot, not because the stove was out to get me. Karma is not an active force. It's just a consequence. Part of Hinduism is the caste system, and you're born into a caste. It's your status. Your family is a member of a caste. The caste system was officially, or discrimination based on the caste system, was outlawed by the Constitution of 1950. Just like in the United States, discrimination was ended in 1963 with the Civil Rights Act. It just made it illegal. There are 4 castes. There's the best caste is the priest caste, the Brahmins. Next is the warriors, business people, and then servants. And there's a 5th caste, the untouchables, the Dalits. And they are so spiritually polluted that you can't touch them. In fact, there was a case of Brahmin priests beating to death in broad daylight an untouchable because his shadow fell on their temple and polluted it. And so they felt justified in beating him to death for spiritually polluting their temple with his shadow. So the caste system, like I said, you were born into it. There's a little wiggle room. You can marry higher. But back in the day, when you were living in a village, everybody knows your family. Everybody knows that you're just in the servant caste. I don't know why you're talking about being in the business or tradesman caste. It's still used in wedding ads. Like if you look in the Times of India, they've got a their dating section is the marriage section, and it's filled with Brahmin software engineers. And what I was going to say is the caste system worked. It's a horrible system of prejudice and discrimination enshrined as religion. But as India modernizes and people start moving around more, if you move to a big city and nobody knows you, boom, you can be whatever you want. If you're at home in your tiny village where your parents have known everybody else's parents and they knew their parents and their parents and their parents back to forever, yeah, everybody knows you're a servant. But increased mobility is leading to issues with the caste system in India, but it's still very much in effect. Moving on from the Hindus, let's talk about the Sikhs. Guru Nanak is regarded as the founder of the Sikh faith in the Punjab in India, in northern India. Guru Nanak was a Hindu and a Muslim. I was going to say he was a monotheist, so he had no problem accepting or reconciling whatever apparent differences people have between being a Hindu and being a Muslim. He said, no, there's just the one God. And boom, right out of the gate, making himself unpopular. As you remember from mere moments ago, the highest, the best, the most powerful caste was the Brahmin or priest caste. So right out the gate, Guru Nanak said, hey, priests are just humans. And they're subject to being human. And so they might lead you wrong. You should not trust priests. And the caste system is no good. So his opening shot was at the priesthood by rejecting the priesthood and rejecting the caste system. And the highest caste is the priest caste. All Sikh men have the name Singh, which means lion. All Sikh women have the name Kaur in their name. There were a series of Sikh gurus. Guru Nanak was the first. This is Guru Gobind Singh. He was the last Sikh guru. The 10th Sikh guru, Guru Gobind Singh, revised the Guru Granth. And the Guru Granth is the Sikh holy book. It is a compilation. It's like a greatest hits album. It's got Christian, it's got Buddhist, it's got Hindu, it's got Muslim teachings in it. And back in the days when we could go outside the house, yeah, if we were on campus, we would probably go make a field trip day of different religious sites around Sacramento, go up to Yuba City with their large Sikh population. I believe they have 2 Sikh temples. And once upon a time, I took one of my classes to one of the Sikh temples in Yuba City, and we showed up on a Friday, and they told us that they were reading the whole Guru Granth. It's, several hundred pages. So Friday morning, somebody would start reading, and then they would take a break and have snacks, and the snacks were provided for everybody by a family. It was their honor to provide food and nourishment during the reading of the Guru Granth, and then they'd go back to reading, take a break, have lunch, go back to reading, take a break, have afternoon snacks, go back to reading, take a break, have dinner, and then come back and do it all over again Saturday, come back and do it all over again Sunday. So every week they're reading through the entire holy book, which is it's the only faith I know of that does that. But the 10th Sikh guru, Guru Gobind Singh, said, not only are priests bad, but Sikh gurus we're just human. And so he revised the Guru Granth and said, okay, this is it. Everything you need to know is in this book. Don't listen to what the people tell you. Don't listen to what gurus tell you necessarily if it conflicts with what's in this book. And at the Sikh temple in Yuba City that we went to, this book during the week was put on a bed in a bedroom, and I'm assuming it was the bedroom in the temple that would have been the priest's quarters. So they really took that literally, and the Guru Granth, this book, lives in a bedroom on a bed when they're not reading it. Sikhs are obvious by the 5 Ks: Kesh, Kanga, Kirpan, Kach, and Kara. The 5 Ks. Kesh, your hair and your beard are not cut. It's very un-American to tell people that you're fine just the way you are. If you're supposed to have short hair, God would have made you with short hair. If you're supposed to trim your beard, God would have made you without a beard. So they allow their hair and their beard to grow, much like the Shivites. However, the second K, Kanga, is the word for the comb. So they keep their hair up in a turban, and then when they take it down, it's combed and kept very neat and tidy, which would make them obviously different from Shivites. So they both practitioners have long hair. However, the Sikhs have their hair is always neatly combed and tucked up, along with their beard. And they actually have like food service nets that I've seen to keep their beard tucked up out of the way. The next two, kirpan and kash, the sword kept at all times, and the soldiers' shorts, refer to their willingness to fight for the Sikh faith and the forces of goodness. And then the last is kara, that Sikh men wear a simple iron bracelet that represents the unity of God. One of the Sikh symbols is the khanda, and this is about to get confusing because this whole thing is the khanda, but this sword in the middle is also a khanda. So there's a double-edged sword called a khanda that sits in the middle. The circular weapon, the chakra, surrounds the khanda. And then there's two single-edged swords, or kirpans, Miri and Piri, crossed at the bottom and sit on either side of the khanda and the chakra. Miri and Piri represent the dual nature of the gurus, representing political and spiritual sovereignty. The khanda symbolizes the knowledge of God, and the chakra symbolizes the oneness of God, and then political and spiritual sovereignty. You'll probably see this now hanging from the rear view of cars, the rear view mirror of cars, and also on the air dam of trucks, that in the Central Valley, there's a large population of Sikhs that are into commercial trucking, also agriculture. Buddhism, again, founded by Siddhartha Gautama. Siddhartha Gautama is the person that we call the Buddha, or most people call the Buddha, not realizing that Buddha is a term means enlightened one, and there's been thousands of different Buddhas. But in the West, when we say Buddha, I'd say 99 times out of 100, people are referring to this person, Siddhartha Gautama, who was born a prince in Nepal. His father was a king, and Buddha became enlightened. They say that Siddhartha, as a young boy, his father went to a fortune teller who said that your son, Siddhartha, will either become a great religious leader or a great political leader. And his dad thought, well, he's a prince. He's got to be a great political leader. So his father kept him in the house and away from anything that would potentially awaken any spiritual awareness. But when he was a young boy, when he was a teenager, he started sneaking out of the house with his chaperone. And one day they were heading towards the city, bright lights, big city. And they came across somebody that was sick. And Siddhartha said, what was the deal with that guy? He didn't look right. And so the chaperone had to explain to Siddhartha that all humans get sick, that his father had kept sick people away from him as part of this don't do anything to encourage any religious ideas. And then later, another time, they were walking out, sneaking out of the castle, going to the city, and they came across a corpse. And Siddhartha said, hey, I know what this is. This guy's sick, right? And his chaperone said, oh, no, he's dead. And Siddhartha's all, what do you mean he's dead? So his chaperone had to explain, all humans are born, we live, and we die. And so that triggered in Siddhartha, that was the beginning of his religious path, that eventually he abandoned his wife and infant son and went to live as a Shivite, a naked beggar dude in the forest eating, they say, 1 hemp seed a day, and he almost starved to death and was revived with buttermilk by a shepherd girl. And he then decided that he was going to figure this all out, that living a life of luxury as a prince didn't help him figure out the meaning of life. Living a life of poverty and hardship also didn't help him figure it out. And so he vowed to sit down under a fig tree, the Bodhi tree, and meditate until he had figured out the meaning of life. And Buddhists say that Siddhartha, because in each of his incarnations, he had tried very, very hard to reach some sort of spiritual awakening, that the reward for his efforts in this life was that he was able to remember all of the lessons of his past lives. And he figured it out and became enlightened. So the person that we call Buddha, Buddha is a title. It just means enlightened. He is not a god. He was not immortal. Buddhism does not have immortal beings. Buddha was just a dude that figured it out. Buddha means enlightened one. And what he figured out is encapsulated in the Four Noble Truths. And I think it's interesting that Buddhism has lots of numbered things. I think it's to help make it easier to remember that literacy is something that's relatively new and would have been confined to a small group of people. And so if you can make it easy for the common people and normal people to remember things, it's going to be easier to spread that idea. So we've got, for example, the Four Noble Truths. We've got the 5 poisons. We've got the 6 perfections. We've got the Eightfold Path. We've got all these things with numbers. It's like, I can remember 4 perfections, but there's 6, so I'm missing 2. The Four Noble Truths, there is suffering, an acknowledgement that there is suffering in life, but that suffering has a cause, and the cause of suffering is attachment and desire. That suffering ends when attachment and desire end, and freedom from suffering is possible by following the Eightfold Path. So the Eightfold Path is right view, right thought, right speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. So by following the Eightfold Path, it'll help you with the Four Noble Truths. Some of the big ideas of Buddhism, they incorporated many Hindu beliefs. Karma and reincarnation are core Buddhist ideas. There's 2 main branches. There's, with, again, a spatial dimension to it. So now we're back into, why do we study this? Well, because there's spatial patterns, right? The first branch is the older school of Buddhism, Theravada, which means way of the elders, also called Hinayana, which means lesser vehicle or raft. So there's Theravada Buddhism. And Mahayana, Maha means great, so Mahayana Buddhism means greater vehicle or larger raft. And so here's the hearth of Buddhism is Nepal. And on this, they've got it broken into Mahayana. Mahayana Buddhism spread into China, Korea, and Japan. In Japan, it became Chan, or in China, it became known as Chan Buddhism, and in Japan, Zen. So Zen Buddhism is a form of Mahayana. Theravada, the way of the elders, practiced mainly in Southeast Asia. So we've got Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam. I know it's not colored on here, but I know that there's Theravada monks in Vietnam. And then Vajrayana, I'm not sure, I would have just lumped them in with Mahayana. Vajrayana is a type of Mahayana Buddhism. It is Tibetan Buddhism. So it's the result of Buddhism mixing with the indigenous shamanistic Bon religion in Tibet. So some of the Bon deities were incorporated in Vajrayana Buddhism. You know, it's the same dude, but he's got a different name now, but same deal. Very similar to what the Christian Catholic churches did in Mexico, incorporating indigenous figures and saying, oh yeah, you can still pray to her, but her name is really the Virgin Mary. But it's the same, so you can just keep doing that. So we've got those 3 branches. Vajrayana, just a type of Mahayana. Theravada Buddhist monks, you may have seen on campus, although not for the last year, but you may have seen on campus Theravada Buddhist monks. They typically wear saffron robes. These are Mahayana Buddhist monks. In fact, these are in the Gelugpa or yellow hat order. You can tell they're in the yellow hat order because they're all wearing yellow hats. These are Tibetan Buddhists from a monastery in India. So the main branch is Theravada, the old school Buddhism, the way of the elders, mainly in Southeast Asia, done by full-time monks, and the emphasis would be placed on gaining spiritual knowledge. So you'd spend a life of study. Mahayana, greater vehicle in Tibet, China, and Japan, and the emphasis in Mahayana Buddhism is placed on compassion. As an example of that, I've got another map showing the spread. Oh, God, that's a horrible map. 1st century from Nepal, up and around the Tibetan Plateau, into China, into Korea, into Japan. So showing up in Japan in the 6th century, showing up in Tibet in the 7th century, and then settling in Southeast Asia, 1st, 2nd century. So it's interesting. Buddhism started in Nepal and then moved to Tibet, moved down into India. And in India, I've got to have a better map. That's better. So we've got the hearth, we've got Buddhism spreading out. And in India, the areas that were Buddhist, Buddhism was stamped out along with Hinduism or suppressed with the Muslim invasion. The Mughal Empire was a Muslim system of rule in India. So for a while, India was ruled by Muslims, and as a result, the Tibetan Buddhists the Buddhists in India, it is said, after the overturn of the Mughal Empire, when they could be Buddhist again, they wrote to Tibet to say, hey, can we borrow some books? Oh, because the books would have been written and transcribed by hand. So in India, they said, hey, can we borrow some of these religious books? And they did. But then Tibetan Buddhism is being largely wiped out by the Chinese. And so if in Tibet, if they ever get self-rule back, they're going to have to go back to India to borrow the books that they used to have, that India borrowed to make copies of the books after the Muslims left. And in Tibet, it'll be having to borrow the books again to rewrite all the books after the Chinese have stopped suppressing and killing them. In Tibetan Buddhism, in Tibetan Mahayana Buddhism, in Tibetan Buddhism, there is a conception of existence that there are 6 classes of sentient, thinking, aware beings. And this is one of the Buddhas. This is the Buddha of compassion, called Chenrezig in Tibetan, called Avalokiteshvara in Sanskrit, and in China and Japan actually is known as, let me get this right, in China known as Kuan Yin, the goddess or the goddess of compassion, and in Japan known as Kenon. So they're gender fluid, Buddhas of compassion. So also on a lotus, this throne is a stylized lotus flower, and you can see there's Chenrezig is holding a lotus, surrounded by lotuses. Lotuses are very important in Tibetan and Buddhist and Hindu art because they can grow in polluted, filthy water, but when the flowers open, they're often pure snow white, symbolizing what is possible for us as human beings to reach enlightenment. And so in Tibetan Buddhism, their conception of existence is there's these 6 classes of beings that what's translated, they're not gods. They're more like universes or galaxies, and they're big and they're vast and they're super duper duper old, and they live so long that they think they're immortal, but they're not. They have lifespans. They die and they're reborn. And there are demigods, which are described as being like the Roman gods. They're into partying and being popular. And then towards the end of their life, they start to decay and smell bad, and so they die abandoned by their followers. there are humans, and they say humans, it is the best. It's like the Goldilocks of existence would be the best possible rebirth, would be being reborn as a human, although the odds are very slim. They say if you can imagine the odds of being born a human, the odds of being born as a human are the same odds as if you imagined Earth covered with an ocean. No land, all ocean. And in that ocean, there is a sea turtle, a blind sea turtle. And that sea turtle comes up to get a breath of air every 100 years. And floating in that ocean somewhere, there's a wooden ring. They say the odds of being born as a human are the same as the odds of that blind sea turtle coming up for air every 100 years, sticking its head right through the wooden ring. There's animals. If you live a life of stupidity, you could be reborn as an animal. The hungry ghosts, I think, are really interesting. The hungry ghosts would be perfect for modern American culture. If you live a life of greed, you could come back as a hungry ghost. If you are never satisfied, if you always want more, if it's never enough, you would come back as a hungry ghost. And they're described as having great, huge stomachs that are empty and little tiny mouths as tiny as the eye of a needle. And if they see food, even if they see food and they find food that they could eat or drink that they could drink because they're always hungry and thirsty, their tiny mouths keep them from eating more than just a tiny bit. And they're often tormented if they see, for example, a banquet of delicious food. When they actually get close enough and pick it up to eat, it would transform into excrement. Or instead of being wine or some sort of refreshing beverage, it would turn to blood or pus. So if you live a life of greed, of never being satisfied with what you have, you could come back as a hungry ghost. And if you live a life of anger, you could come back as a hell being. Remember, all these 6 classes of beings are sentient, thinking, and temporary. They all have lifespans. And so you'd be tortured by, boiling oil or encased in ice or whatever for all of your life, but then you're eventually reborn. So Chenrezig took a vow. Chenrezig, after countless lifetimes, could have opted out of this cyclical existence, this world of suffering that we all inhabit, but said, no, everybody else first. In fact, I take a vow that I will go last. I will be the last being to reach nirvana, that if my determination ever falters, may I be blown into a billion bits. And so Chenrezig started in on the hell beings, and over countless lifetimes, they all reincarnated to become ghosts and animals and humans, and eventually reached nirvana. And then he started in on all the hungry ghosts, and they all reached nirvana. All the animals, they reached nirvana. All the humans, again, countless lifetimes. The demigods, finally, the last god attains nirvana. And Chenrezig goes, whew, man, that took a while. And he looks back, and hell is full again. And he says, oh, man. And he's blown into a billion bits. And all the other Buddhas take pity on him and put him back together in this form. This is the 1,000-armed emanation of Chenrezig. He's got 13 heads, including a little tiny Shakyamuni Buddha head on top. He's got 1,000 arms so that he can work better. So it's an interesting story. I think it provides some illumination into what Tibetan ideas of how you should be as a person, what their ideals are. But it's also important because in Tibetan Buddhism and in Tibet, they believe that Chenrezig, that the Dalai Lama, this is a picture of the 14th Dalai Lama, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso is, I believe, his official title. Dalai Lama is a title, and it means ocean of wisdom. It was given to the Dalai Lama by sorry, it's funny, just because Tibet isn't a military power now, but back in the day, before they became Buddhists, they were so warlike that the Mongolians used to pay them protection money. So Dalai Lama is actually a term given to the Dalai Lama by the Mongolians back in the day when they were a warlike, nasty people before the whole culture adopted Buddhism. So in Tibetan Buddhism, the Dalai Lama, this is believed to be the 14th reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. That this is the 14th time that this being has chosen to reincarnate on this earth into a life of suffering. And they also believe that the Dalai Lama is in fact an incarnation of Chenrezig. So the Dalai Lama was the head of the church, was the head of the political state of Tibet. So it would be like being the Pope and being president all at the same time if the Pope was also a reincarnation of Jesus. So I think that's a pretty good job of putting the Dalai Lama, the context for who the Dalai Lama is believed to be by Tibetans. There's a picture of the Winter Palace, the Potala Palace. I think it has 1,234 rooms. And in 1949, after the revolution in China, the Chinese Revolution, they decided to keep going. In 1949, the Chinese communists invaded Tibet with the aim of liberating them from the rule of the Dalai Lama and the transformation of Tibetan society. So Tibet was really rare in that the head of the church was also the head of the religion. It was a theocracy. Some of the Muslim states are close to this, but there's nothing at the time that approached this level of integration between religion and politics. And so part of this was the destruction of the Tibetan culture, the language, the religion. Most of the monasteries have been destroyed. The Chinese, when they took over, forced monks to literally, in some cases, dismantle their monasteries brick by brick. And then those bricks were used to make roads for the Chinese to move troops around. Out of an estimated population of around 6 million people after the Chinese invaded, at least 1 million have died in the starvation, in the murder at the hands of the Chinese. Over 150,000 refugees out of Tibet, largely into India, going south into Nepal and India. That's where the Dalai Lama has actually lived since he left Tibet, is in India. One of the aspects of Tibetan Buddhism is there's the Dalai Lama, and then also another important figure called the Panchen Lama. It's a title. And the 10th Panchen Lama died in Chinese custody after making some public comments criticizing Chinese rule in Tibet. In May 14th, 1995, the Dalai Lama said, "Oh, this little boy, Gedun Choki Nima, is in fact the reincarnated Panchen Lama. He's right here." The next day, the Chinese government kidnapped him, and he has not been seen since. And the importance of this in the Panchen Lama is the Panchen Lama and the Dalai Lama help identify and train each other. So they're kind of reincarnating, like playing leapfrog. Like the Dalai Lama identifies and trains the Panchen Lama, and then the Panchen Lama identifies and trains the next Dalai Lama, who identifies and trains the Panchen Lama. So the Chinese government has installed a puppet Panchen Lama, which they're going to use for propaganda purposes, because the Dalai Lama has publicly said, hey, if I die and Tibet doesn't have self-rule, I'm not going to reincarnate in Tibet. So if I reincarnate, if the Chinese say that they found me in Tibet, they're lying. Don't listen to them. Look for me elsewhere. So it's really a masterful move by the Chinese. Yeah, it's like voter suppression in the U.S., trying to set up the stage for the next election. In this case, after the death of the Dalai Lama, the Chinese communists will probably try to install a puppet Dalai Lama who will say nice things about China. Oh, I forgot to mention about the destruction of the monasteries. The Chinese government cleverly has left a couple monasteries intact for tourism and cash money. So as a Western tourist, you could go to Tibet and come back and say, well, you wouldn't go to Tibet. You'd say, I went to China. But you'd say, yeah, I went to China and I went to a Tibetan Buddhist monastery, and I don't know what you're talking about with religious suppression. They're all doing fine. Well, what the Chinese have done is instituted strict reforms, like they've now made mandatory retirement ages for monks, you have to get government approval to be a monk. So if you're a Tibetan Buddhist monk in China, you're certainly not going to say anything critical of Chinese communist rule, because then you'll be forced to leave the monastery. So they're getting a lot of propaganda value from people visiting the monasteries that are show monasteries in China. And there's been people, Western tourists, kidnapped, or not kidnapped, but picked up and arrested for wearing a t-shirt that had a picture of a 1950s American sitcom star who had the same kind of glasses as the Dalai Lama. They thought it was a picture of the Dalai Lama. And so they were picked up and held for questioning, because it's illegal to have a picture of the Dalai Lama in China. So one of the big points of the Four Noble Truths is that suffering ends when attachment and desire end. And in Tibetan Buddhism, they have this tradition of making sand mandalas. This is the mandala on the table. There's a close-up. It's made with loose sand. There's nothing holding it in place. In fact, it'll be destroyed. And yeah, this is a good one. It is a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional universe inhabited by a particular Buddha. And on the mandala, you'll notice there's the 8 auspicious symbols. There's the Vajra, which means lightning bolt or diamond in Tibetan. There's the conch, the fish, the endless knot, the 8-spoked wheel, indicating the eightfold path of the Dharma, a lotus, a parasol, and I don't know what that one is. If we zoom in, all of this is meaningful. And if you're a Tibetan Buddhist monk, you would memorize the proportions and what colors go where and how much. So we've got another 8-spoked wheel. We've got 2 deer, which are symbolic of Deer Park, which was the location that Siddhartha gave his first sermon after reaching enlightenment. You can see, like, yeah, all these, that's just a little pile of sand. All those little dots are little piles of sand that were... Yeah, so I included in the playlist, we've got a couple videos of time lapses. You can see the instruments that they use. They set up this grid. They sprinkle the sand all over it. They set up the grid. No, I need to go back. I wish I knew how to use the YouTube. There you go. All right. So back in the day, if you were, let's see if I can get right to a little bit more there. That's good. Just let you play. So you can see them working on it, sprinkling the little grains of sand with their little metal funnels. And like I said, all of this is memorized. If you were in a Tibetan Buddhist culture and you were concerned about your reincarnation, you would, I gotta stop this now. You would have donated sapphires and rubies and emeralds, precious gems that they would grind up into sand that they would use to make this. So these monks have spent 40 hours, and when they're done, they sweep it up and throw it away, because suffering comes from attachment and desire. They typically put it in the nearest body of water that the good vibes will then spread out throughout the earth. In San Francisco, many years ago, monks were doing a demonstration mandala, and a deranged person, a woman, hopped up on the table and started kicking the sand before the museum guards could get a hold of her and get her off the table. And the museum officials were just horrified at the damage that this woman had done to their sand painting. And the monks, because they're monks and they're not attached, they said, that's no big deal. We'll just start over. We don't care. The important thing is doing it. We're not attached to it. So when they're all done, they sweep it up. And some of the ceremonies that I've been to, they'll give people little bags to take home. And then, like I said, they'll dump the rest in a river or an ocean, because suffering comes from attachment and desire. I might have made too many videos for the notes. Ethnic religions, local religions. Let's talk about those. Let's move from Buddhism to some of the ethnic religions, we've got animism, which is the idea that natural features or natural phenomenon have awareness, like that cliff, that tree, that rock, that flower, that storm, that ocean, that lake, that stream. Shamanism is a religion that involves direct communication with those spirits or beings. Confucianism in China and Taoism were both very popular at the same time, and I'll talk about that. Shinto, a Japanese ethnic religion. So the places where they have ethnic religions, we've got Hinduism, we've got Judaism, and then we have the shaded areas, and there should be shaded areas in the United States. There should be shaded areas across the Arctic and Australia and Africa, that there's a relationship between shamans or places where shamanism is still practiced and places where there's still hunters and gatherers, still traditional people, Aborigines in Australia, different groups in Africa, people in the Amazonian rainforest, Arctic people around the Arctic Circle, and in many other places across the world. So, for example, Africa, we've got Muslims in the north and the east. We've got Catholics in the former French and Belgian areas. We've got Protestants in the former British colonies. And then we have little core areas of traditional African religions, which would again be some sort of shamanism. And then those religions over time became what we know of as voodoo after the people in the religions were transported, after they were stolen, kidnapped, brutalized, and brought to another country. Animism, in that inanimate objects have spirits or an awareness. And shamanism involves direct communication with spirits. I've got another presentation that I'll show you in a minute. Direct communication with spirits, usually in some sort of a trance state, through drumming or dancing or fasting or the use of entheogens, which I'll talk a lot about. Some religions are global, some are clustered. Zoroastrianism in Iran, Judaism in Israel and the United States, the Sikh faith, mainly in the Punjab, Jains in India, Hinduism in India, Qawwali in Vietnam, Shinto in Japan, and Juche, the North Korean worship of Kim Jong-un. And as would be expected, as the world changes, everything changes. So traditional folk religions, people are abandoning in favor of Islam and different sects of Christianity. You can see areas of Buddhism and Shintoism in Japan. Confucianism was actually started by somebody that we think was called Kung Fu Tzu. And Tzu means master or mister, so Mr. Kung Fu, but not that kind of Kung Fu. Kung Fu Tzu lived around 500 before Common Era. He wrote a book called The Analects. Kung Fu Tzu, I would say his focus was harmony in society. And harmony was found through obedience. Do what you're told. If you're a parent, you should look after your children. If you're a child, listen to your parents. If you're a ruler, you should look after your subjects. And subjects, because your ruler is looking out for you, you should just do what they tell you to do. So The Analects was the book. I was going to say, if you've ever read anything in a fortune cookie, like Confucius say, whatever, yeah, it's not from Confucius. It's not from Kung Fu Tzu. This is what Kung Fu Tzu had to say. Is it not pleasant to learn with a constant perseverance and application? Fine words and an insinuating appearance are seldom associated with true virtue. So Kung Fu Tzu also in the Analects had like instructions on how to enter a room and show obedience to your superiors. So Kung Fu Tzu very concerned with harmony in a society, harmony on an individual way, and the harmony for the society and the harmony for an individual is found by doing what you're told and fitting in. However, at the same time in China, there was Lao Tzu, which means old venerable master, or maybe, depending on the translation, also might mean Mr. Baby. Tao, the word Tao refers to the way, meaning path, like a walking path. I'm on the way, and also making your way through life, your path through your life. The main text is the Tao Te Ching. The Tao Te Ching dates to the 4th century BCE. There's also the I Ching, a book of divination, where you use flower stalks to come up with a hexagram that you look up in the book, and that's like your daily reading to help you understand what's going on with your life. So themes of the Tao Te Ching are naturalist, and harmony can be found by looking to nature. Look at bamboo that gives way when strong wind gusts come, unlike the oak that remains rigid and just breaks. So Taoists believed that the answers to the meaning of life could be found through observing nature, and a better path would be to be as natural as possible. Spontaneity, doing what seems to be the right thing to do at the time to do it, without pre-planning. Simplicity, detachment from desires, that's a familiar theme. And Wu Wei, naturalness, looking to the original nature, the idea of Pu, the uncarved block representing your original nature, which is fine as it is. Wu Wei refers to non-action, the idea that you should do things spontaneously at the right time, and you can do things spontaneously at the right time if you haven't been planning and obsessing about when's the right time to do it. Also called action without intent. Effortless action is Wei Wu Wei, which is just doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do at the right time, spontaneously. Action without action. Wu Wei is associated with water through its yielding principle. Water, the Taoists are very much into complementary opposites: hard and soft, light and dark, hot and cold, male and female, empty and full. The yin-yang symbol is a Taoist symbol. So they look to nature, they look to water. Water is the softest thing there is, but if you give it 3 million years, it'll carve out the Grand Canyon through solid rock, and in some places rock that is harder than metal. So this is from the Tao Te Ching, Chapter 1. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of the 10,000 things. Ever desireless, one can see the mystery. Ever desiring, one sees the manifestations. These two spring from the same source, but different from name. This appears as darkness, darkness within darkness, the gate to all mystery. So that's from the Tao Te Ching. And the I Ching, the Book of Changes. So this is chapter 63. After you've tossed the yarrow stalks, you'd look up, you'd make the hexagram. And if you look it up and you got chapter 63, chapter 63 says, consider beginnings, do without doing, act without action, savor the flavorless, treat the small as large, the few as many, meet injury with the power of goodness. Study the hard while it's easy, do the big things while they're small. The hardest jobs start out easy. The great affairs of the world start out small. So the wise soul, by never dealing with great things, gets great things done. Now, since taking things too lightly makes them worthless and taking things too easy makes them hard, the wise soul, by treating the easy as hard, doesn't find anything hard. So I need to think about that and how that relates to whatever is going on for you that day. I Ching. Sacred spaces, continuing on, why do we study religion? Well, religion often informs people's views of the environment. And one of the Wade Davises, he said, as a Canadian, I was taught that, that mountain represents ore to be crushed and made into metal, or the trees represent timber to be cut down and made into houses, as opposed to it's the dwelling place of sacred beings, or those trees themselves are sacred beings. So here we have Mecca, the Kaaba, where all Muslims try to make a pilgrimage to at least once in their life. The picture of the crowd around the Kaaba. Another view of the crowd around the Kaaba. Oh yeah, I need to go find an ad. There's some really interesting documentaries on the Hajj. And of the cultural diversity of the Muslim world, that, as you remember from the maps, Muslims live all over the world, but all of them go to the Hajj. And so often the areas where these people are sleeping and camping, they're set up by the Saudi government so that, for example, all the Jews from Ethiopia, we're going to put them in this spot because they speak the same language, they eat the same food. All the Indonesian Muslims, we're going to put them over here. It's the logistical demands of accommodating tens, hundreds of thousands of people overnight for a short term before they all leave again. It would appear that I've got a video on Mecca. That's good. This is a video on the Buddhist pilgrimage to Mount Kailash in Tibet. I think it's from a movie made by Werner Herzog. So in Tibet, there's many places that are special. And if you're a Tibetan Buddhist, they believe by doing physical acts, you can do spiritual works. And so one of them is not just making a pilgrimage, but you'd make a circumambulation where you walk clockwise around Mount Kailash. Walk or perform prostrations. This is from that video of the pilgrimage around Mount Kailash. So to make a pilgrimage via prostrations, you lie down and then you stand up. And you can see they've got an apron, a leather apron to protect their clothes. They've got these gloves on their hands. And so they will take a few steps and lay down and prostrate themselves and get up and take a few steps and lay down and prostrate themselves and, make a walk of hundreds of miles doing that to accrue spiritual merit. I've got a video on the Kumbh Mela. These are all both in the notes and in the playlist for this chapter. And the Kikak from the video Baraka about different cultures all over the world. This is in Bali, and it's a Hindu ceremony. It's in Bali, the Kikak. It's telling the story of Ramayana. The monkey-like Vajrayana led by Hanuman helped Prince Rama fight the evil king Ravana. It is an incredibly long story, and they have this ceremony. Watch the video. It's some amazing stuff. Originally, it was a trance ritual, and I think when you see the ceremony, you'll be like, oh, yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, let's just... Bali, Cambodia. We're still in Cambodia. Let's go to Bali. And this goes on for hours and hours and hours. Good times. Bali, Kikak. Yeah, this was a really interesting, looking up the Kikak, I found this. This is an example of what James Clifford describes as part of the modern art culture system, where the West, a dominant power center, transforms, consumes non-Western or peripheral cultural elements while making art, which was once embedded in the culture as a whole, not a separate entity. So there's this ritual, and the ritual exists in space and time and in culture, but when we watch it in the movie, it's just part of pretty images. I mean, the whole movie, there's no narration in the movie Baraka. It's just artistic shots of different places all over the world, but it's now been taken out of its context, so it's impossible to understand in the way that the people doing it understand it. Depicts the story. Yeah, the abduction of Sita, the battle between Ravana and Jatayu, the search for Sita by Hanuman, the battle. One of the longest epics in world literature. These are some of the sacred places, some of the important places for Hindus, the little red triangles for Hindus. And the green dots are important places for pilgrimages. You can see Mount Kailash, apparently important to Shivites. Oh, yeah. And then they've got places that indicate the main deity or form of worship, Vishnu and Shiva and Shakti, female consort. Catholic names on the Quebec landscape in Canada. In terms of space, I wanted to mention again the genocide in Israel of the Palestinian people at the hands of the Israelis by the occupation of formerly Palestinian land. We can see everything green was Palestinian in 1947. After that, the United Nations came in, and the State of Israel, founded in 1947, immediately started taking Palestinian land. And now there's the Gaza Strip, 2005, and the West Bank. Another view from another textbook showing the effects of fragmentation in the West Bank. Jerusalem, it's important to note, especially in the context of what's coming up, that Mike Pompeo moved the American embassy to Jerusalem. And part of the reason I think Mike Pompeo did that, again, this is the West Bank again, with Israeli settlements. So the Israelis are illegally invading Palestinian land, bulldozing the houses, bulldozing the olive groves, in some cases olive groves that are 500 years old, and allowing Israelis to settle there. This American Life did a program a couple of years ago on the relationship between fundamentalist Christians who are hoping that Jesus will come soon and Orthodox Jews. So in Judaism, one of the most important temples was the Temple of Solomon. The Temple of Solomon was destroyed by the Romans. And every year, the Jews were supposed to sacrifice a red cow in the Temple of Solomon. That was one of the important annual events in the Jewish religious calendar. Well, after the Temple of Solomon was destroyed, they haven't been able to do that. And in America, there are fundamentalist evangelical Christians that want to speed up what they believe is the return of Jesus. And in order for Jesus to come back, they believe that the Jews have to sacrifice a perfect red cow, no white hairs, only red hairs. They have to sacrifice a red heifer in the Temple of Solomon. And after that happens, then Jesus gets to come back. Well, one of the problems with that, and this is Jerusalem, and we've got the Christian quarter, the Armenian quarter, the Muslim quarter, the Jewish quarter in Jerusalem. The Dome of the Rock is one of the most important Muslim sites in the world. The Dome of the Rock was built on top of the Temple of Solomon. So the former site of the Temple of Solomon has now been rebuilt as a Muslim mosque. And so every now and then somebody will, either evangelical Christians or Orthodox Jews will try to blow up the Dome of the Rock so that the Temple of Solomon can be built. And so evangelical Christians are hard at work in the United States trying to get a red heifer that could then be sacrificed in the Dome of the Rock after it's in the Temple of Solomon after the Dome of the Rock is destroyed, which would kick off a holy war across the Mideast. But it doesn't matter because Jesus would come back. I would recommend checking out the program. There's a link to it in the notes. Lebanon, another country in the Mideast, just north of Israel, just west of Syria, showing religious divisions in Lebanon. And I believe all of these back in the 80s and 90s had their own armies. So the Christians had their own armies, Sunni Muslims had their own army, the Shiites had their own army, and then the Druze, which is some sort of Christian denomination, they also had their own army, and they're all fighting each other. Ireland, speaking of space, you can see the percent Protestant. So this part, this is the border. This is part of the United Kingdom. This is Northern Ireland. It's on the island of Ireland, but it's part of England. This is the Sovereign Republic of Ireland. Since 1920, it's been its own country, predominantly Catholic, predominantly Protestant, wants to be part of the United Kingdom. And so the conflict that's gone on in Ireland has been largely political about who should rule Ireland. Should it be the Irish or should it be the British, the colonizing invaders? And unfortunately, there's a religious aspect to it in which the Republicans for the Republic of Ireland are largely Catholic, and the Protestants are largely for British rule. And that's it. Sorry to end on a bummer note, but that's it for religion. Oh, next up is shamanism.